This is A Geek Leader. Hey guys, welcome to episode 149 of A Geek Leader podcast. I'm your host, John Rauda. And I wanted to start out just by saying how grateful I am that you guys get to listen to this, that I get to still produce this in this time that we're having. And I want to say that I'm grateful for my health. I'm still well. I am coronavirus free at the moment. So really grateful for that. I'm grateful that, society has not completely collapsed going through this, that I was able to get toilet paper the other day, and that things are just going great. So I hope you guys also start out your day with gratitude. And after listening to this, I hope you just pause for a minute and just be grateful for things and, say it out loud. Say the things that you are grateful for. It'll help your day. It'll make you smile a little bit to think about all the good things that are going on, even if there's a lot of bad going on as well. And with that being said, I want to also thank our sponsor, Splashtop. So I've talked about Splashtop for many, many times on the show, and I'm continuing to talk about them because they've, been a lifesaver for many people like myself and my company that have had to remotely work from home. Using Splashtop allows us to remotely manage machines. You can do it from my iPad. Just today, I have used my iPad to remotely manage machines. I have logged into Splashtop from my Mac, from a PC. I've done lots of things that you can do with Splashtop. So if you are having to mobilize a workforce, or you're in the midst of that and you don't know, how to do certain solutions, you need a machine that's connected to your network or your corporate computer to your SAN somewhere, and you don't have access to VPN or anything like that, Splashtop will allow you to remotely manage those machines in a secure way. And right now they are offering a free trial as well as huge discounts to our listeners. So please check them out at ageekleader.com/splashtop. All right, Geek Leaders. Today on the show, I've got Dr. David Arrington, and he has been doing leadership consulting and executive coaching for over 15 years, and he wrote a book called Promotable that we're going to be talking about today on how to, highlight some of the ways that your career can be improved upon in the future. And welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, John. Glad to be here.
So if you don't mind telling the audience a little bit about how you've gotten to where you are in your career, kind of what your history's been like, and how that's helped you become the man you are today.
Well, it's a long story that I'll make short. I started off with a bachelor's in computer information systems and moved into doing some network engineering. I was building networks the size and on the scale of the internet for Exxon and Schlumberger way back in the prehistoric days. And then I moved on. I pastored for 12 years. I gave up that computer science gig, the networking gig, and I pastored for about 12 years. Over that time, I started doing more and more coaching with leaders in the church and outside of the church. And I found that it was something I really enjoyed, but it wasn't until I did my doctorate in strategic leadership that I found out that I was a terrible coach. I was confusing coaching and mentoring. I was confusing coaching with advising. I was given a lot of answers when I should have been asking a lot more questions. That's where the doctorate and those skills really developed. My coaching skills really developed even more after as I was going through that process. Now I am doing this full time. I coach executives. I coach leaders at different levels of the organization full time. And that's pretty much, like I said, the long and short of how I got here. Said long story. I just kind of condensed 20 plus years into about a minute and 10, I guess.
No, that's cool. That's cool. So I've talked to my pastor quite a few times about like how much work goes into preparing a sermon and speaking, and how has that kind of helped you do the coaching and some of the keynote speaking and things that you do today?
Oh man, when you have to get up every week and tell people stories they already know the ending to, you learn to be really good at drawing on details, drawing on a nuance, helping people see things in a fresh way. So yeah, that has absolutely rounded out my coaching and definitely rounded out my speaking. Some people still tell me they can hear me preaching, and I used to it used to bother me, but now I've kind of just come to understand that that's just my cadence, how I talk and how I prepare things. And that's why people like when I come in to speak and when I teach, like we were talking about just a minute before we started recording, when I come in and teach, I'm always presenting leadership topics from angles that people didn't expect and bringing them to places in trainings and in keynotes that they didn't expect they would get to, because I'm going to always take a fresh look at it, because if I'm super familiar with it, I don't want to get bored with the information. I don't want to get bored with the topic. So that's one of the ways I keep myself, my edge sharp as I'm moving forward. I always revisit topics, look at them again, figure out what's an angle I had missed or something that most people probably have missed or didn't see as easily, because when we're really familiar with topics like leadership, we take it for granted that we know what we're talking about. So I always even when I'm just working with a client or if I'm doing a training, I'll start with basic definitions. And it's always amazing how simple things like team or accountability or, leadership, I just ask what those things mean, and people don't understand them fundamentally. You'll get bits and pieces, but that's the fun part of taking a fresh perspective. I get to break it down to the very, very basics and then build it back up so people understand more fully than if I just went in as a talking head. So yeah, it's definitely helped.
Yeah, for sure. And I know, like, I find myself taking things that I hear that maybe have been delivered in a religious content. Like, for example, we're talking on a Monday right now, and I had Pastor T.D. Jakes was actually in our church yesterday, preaching, and I took some of the things that he was talking about from a religious standpoint. I'm like, oh, I can use that at work. I can use that, when I'm doing this podcast or whatever I'm doing, and take some of those nuggets and try to incorporate those into maybe my next talk or something else that I'm going to use. And I find, hearing some of that information is very helpful across the board. And I like what you said about breaking things down to the simplest form. And a lot of times I like to do that too, is I like to start with the definition, like you mentioned, leader. And, I'll go out and ask my kids, and, I got a 9-year-old daughter, a 6-year-old son, and I'll ask them, what do you think a leader is? And they'll say something like, the person in the front of the water line or whatever, But you can take that information and kind of build something that's very powerful out of that. Like a leader goes first. A leader does have to lead the line and show people the way to go. So I think that's really helpful and powerful. Yeah.
Well, I mean, the funny thing about just that topic, and I mentioned it in the book, there was a paper done a few years back, and they found over 1,000 different definitions and constructs just for the term leader or leadership. So it's very, very broad. It's culturally defined and sometimes even organizationally defined. So what is good leadership at one organization may be different than what's good leadership at another organization, and it definitely does not cross country and cultural boundaries. So what's good leadership in the Middle East or in Asia may not look like good leadership in the U.S. So when you're a leader, you're definitely walking a tightrope, because in a super connected global environment that you could be walking into every day at your job, you've got to be aware of all those different nuances so that you can lead your folks effectively.
Yeah, for sure. I think, I guess you call it audience. Audience is important, knowing exactly who you're leading and who's going to be, responding to what you're doing.
Yep.
Let's talk a little bit about your book. You got me a free copy of that, a couple weeks ago. I really appreciate it. Tell me a little bit about kind of what the premise is from the book, Promotable, and, why you decided to put this together.
So the premise is fundamentally that Gen X leaders are being overlooked. So there was a Harvard Business Review study that showed that while we're Gen X, a big part of the workforce, you've got boomers that are coming back to the workforce. People think they're retiring. They're actually not. They're coming back. Then you've got millennials. Everybody's obsessed with millennials, and I think they're awesome. But guess what? That leaves Gen X in the middle, almost as a forgotten category. And what I've noticed was, and what statistics have proven, is that Gen X leaders are less likely to be promoted, even though they're doing the lion's share of the work. And that, to me, it's not fair, it's not awesome, but it also presents an opportunity to help Gen X leaders regain control of their careers, regain control of their destinies, so that they can actually say that these are the things I'm doing to make sure that I'm not overlooked, or if I've been passed over for a promotion, that's not going to happen again, because I'm going to invest in me. I'm going to build up my skill set. I'm going to become the best leader. I'm going to become the most obvious choice for this position the next time around. So that's fundamentally why I wrote it. I mean, and the background is, like I mentioned before we started talking, it kind of happened in a white hot heat of inspiration, right? I was writing a pillar post. I had been working with a new client, which was, she wasn't an executive. She was more of an organizational leader, kind of in the middle to not middle management. So I was working with someone, and her experience kind of resonated with mine, where I was doing a great job a ways back, and I talk about this in the book. And I just had a conversation with my supervisor, and I was told, hey, guess what? We're never really going to consider you for any other positions. You're pretty much maxed out where you were. And that really, really ate at me, because I was doing everything in my control to actually be the right kind of employee that could be promoted. And then I found out, hey, it was never going to happen. So I had to make some moves to make sure that my family was taken care of, that I was fulfilled at work, and that I could fulfill my purpose at work. And her story kind of resonated. And I think Promotable is where all of these different things, the research I was doing, my experience and her experience, all kind of came together. And that's kind of where Promotable just showed up out of that.
Yeah, for sure. So being a Gen Xer myself, what are some things that I can do maybe to help be promotable, so I don't get in that position that you were at, where you said, hey, I've reached the ceiling, no one's going to give me another opportunity. I'm kind of stuck here. And if I do find myself in that position, what do I do to get out of it?
Well, there are a lot of things you can do to get out of it. And that's very important to understand. You're always in control. I had a conversation with a friend of mine. I think I mentioned this in the book. We were out at lunch, and he was saying, hey, man, I feel like I'm pigeonholed. I'm stuck. I mean, he started going down a rabbit hole here. And my wife, his wife, he and I were talking, and he was like, man, it's just, it's so difficult. He went, whole part. I said, stop. What can you do? I said, you can get another job. You can just quit. You can go back to school. And I started rattling off 4 and 5 things he could do to regain control. And that's kind of where the book goes. It's all about regaining control. Some of the things you can do, like I mentioned, you can think like a free agent. You can say to yourself, okay, maybe I can't move up here. Where can I move up? And you start shopping and look around and see, okay, where are my skills more valued? When I was early in my career, I was working for one multinational organization, but the culture didn't fit. So I had to start looking around to find another one where it was a better fit for me, because I could tell I wasn't going to, make any progress here. And even if I did, I wouldn't really like the person I'd have to be to move up at this place, because that's also important. You've got to make your moves in a way that keeps that you can sleep at night, that you can look at yourself in the mirror and say, hey, I still like this guy. I still like this lady that's looking back at me, because fundamentally the whole idea of just climbing over people and stepping on people to get where you're going, it's flawed, because when you get where you're going, if you've broken all those relationships, if there's just a wake of human carnage behind you, you still need all of those people to help you when you get into the role. So by destroying all those relationships, you really shoot yourself in the foot. But yeah, one of the easiest things you can do is start thinking like a free agent. You're not tethered to this job. And for many people, that's difficult, because it's the unknown. It's change. What's going to happen? Will I even be able to get another job? Am I really trapped here? But once you just start, looking, start floating your resume, and I talk about using LinkedIn and all that good stuff. But once you start looking, there are tons of opportunities. There are opportunities everywhere, but you've got to go look for them. Some of them may be a little bit more obscure. They may be a little bit more hidden, but there's always opportunities for people that have kept their skill sets up, that are in demand, that are at the top of their game, that are doing amazing work. There are always opportunities for people like that. And I just hinted at some other ways that you can make yourself more promotable.
So, yeah, for definitely. So I'm thinking about it myself. So if I feel like I'm at a ceiling, one of the first things to do is to kind of see what else may be out there, to get myself to realize that I'm in control, and I need to take the lead. So let's say I go out there, start floating some resumes, but I'm still fearful, right? So what do I need to do next?
So basically bloom where you're planted, right? The first thing I do is, if you think that you're kind of pigeonholed, I would ask for feedback. And I would ask for feedback from your boss, and I'd ask for feedback from people that are in your sphere of influence, people that work with you. And I have a quick and dirty 360 that we'll link up, because I think it's at these are the downloads from the book. I think it's arringtoncoaching.com/promotable-book. And I think you can get them all there. But it's a quick and dirty 360 that will allow you to shoot an email to some friends and say, hey, give me some insight. Help me to understand where I have some gaps, where I can grow. You may want to do this conversation with your boss, but give them these questions ahead of time so they can think through it. Because often your boss is busy with their own stuff, and they may not really be able to say where you can move up and what you need to do better. They'll probably just see they may just pat you on the head, or they may say, okay, if you really want to move up, here are the 5 or 6 things that I've seen in you that are going to have to change if you want to move up. This is the part where you got to have a little bit of thick skin, because I'm going to, spoiler alert, you're not perfect. And most of us think, when we think feedback, we think, oh, we want people to tell us how good we are. The problem is, sometimes you're going to get feedback that says, here's where you need to grow. And that's often the better feedback. I had a boss way back in the day, and everything I did, he was like, oh man, you're awesome. You're great. This is great. Whenever I said, okay, tell me how I could improve, he was like, man, you're doing great. There's nothing. And that's just completely unhelpful. The first few times it felt good. By the 5th time, it was like, okay, dude, you need to be able to tell me something here.
Yeah.
So you want somebody to say, here's where you can grow. So I would tell you, first thing, start by asking for feedback, and, just dovetailing with that, actually put that feedback to work. Most people will hear, here's what you need to do, and then they won't do it. It's just fundamental. We say, oh, okay, that's great, and then we go back to what we were doing. So what you want to do is you want to ask for feedback, and then implement as much of that feedback once you put it through a filter of, does this make sense? Is this relevant? Do I agree with this? These are all the kind of things I walk through in the book.
Awesome. I think that's really good. And one of the things that you mentioned this early on, is to make sure you stay yourself. And whenever you are looking for something different, sometimes you feel like you need to change, and you feel like you may need to adapt. What's the difference between adapting and changing, but still keeping that core moral values? Like understanding that you're still the same person, even though you've had to, adjust a little bit.
Well, that's one of the things I work on with my clients, John. That's a great question. So understanding your core values, most people don't. Most people don't really know who they are. They're just kind of going through the motions. And even when I'm working with my executive clients, right, or middle management and up, they resist that because it's difficult. And that's because it requires us to take a hard look at who we are, and then draw a line in the sand and say who we aren't. So when you understand who you are, it's easier to say, I can do this and I won't do that. So I would encourage people to just take a minute and figure out what's important to you. What do you want to see as far as, do the whole finish line, where you want to be at the end of your career, who you want standing there with you, cheering you on, making sure that you're doing the things day to day now to make sure you can make that a reality.
Yeah. I've heard people say, like, you should write your eulogy. You should figure out, like, what your legacy is going to be, and then, start from there and work backwards. Is that something you recommend to do?
It's very similar. I just don't do the morbid, I'm dead thing.
Me either.
I do the, hey, you're at your retirement party. And that's what I do. So, hey, there's still a few more years out there. I'm not saying, somebody's reading this over you, but it's a very similar topic. It's start at the end, think about the outcomes, think about the way you want this to be, and then work backwards. It's a very simple concept, difficult to implement. So you want to just, as you're looking at that end result, you kind of do the breakdown. Okay, if I'm going to be the kind of person that is X, what does that require of me today? What kind of decisions do I need to make today and tomorrow and the next day, so that in 20 years or in 30 years, I've made enough of those decisions that it brings me to this place where I am this awesome person. Not like that's the finished product, but you're always becoming that person. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I like to say it's always a process. You're never, you're not a project. You're not going to be finished. You're always going to be, moving forward. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, what's next on the list of being promotable and getting ourselves ready for this advancement and these changes?
Great question, John. Glad you asked. I would do the next thing I would encourage people to do is understand your boss's goals. This is a 200 IQ move. And it's so funny. Someone wrote they wrote an Amazon review on the book and said they did something very similar. And what you do is you stop thinking about yourself and you being promoted and think more about what your boss is worried about, what's big on their agenda. Because what this does is it makes you not somebody else they have to manage, but it kind of moves you up on the scale so they see you as a partner, someone who can get things done, someone who has perspective beyond their tasks and their role and their assignment, and someone who's looking outside of their role and saying, okay, how does what I do impact my boss? Because guess what? Your boss has people that they answer to, and they have their own set of responsibilities. They have their own set of things that they've got to get done. So when you ask your boss, hey, what's important to you? Where does this fit in your priorities? One, it helps you to prioritize the things you're doing. Two, it helps them to see you as someone who is, like I said, not necessarily needing to be managed, but someone who they can depend on. And that's going to cause you to be looked at a lot differently than someone who just comes in and says, what do I need to do? What do I need to do? Clocks in and clocks out, goes home and never asks that question. It's a big question that most people don't ask.
Yeah, for sure. I found that I actually started doing that. Someone gave me advice very similar to that I need to try to do the things that your boss wants done, but they haven't asked you to do yet. Kind of try to stay a step ahead of them. And when I started having that mindset of trying to think, okay, so what are my boss's goals? What are the things that they need to do that I can help out with that haven't been assigned to me yet? It's kind of one of those ideas that they start seeing you as being, like you said, a partner or being ahead of the game a little bit and kind of operating at their level versus someone kind of beneath them. I hate saying that, but it's kind of the truth.
It's fun. And I would just take that one step further, John. Mm-hmm. I would go, don't guess at it, ask them. Because I guarantee you their goals are top of mind. Their pressures are top of mind. And if you ask them a direct question, it's going to make them stop, make them think, and then it's going to solidify your position versus them just knowing you're solid. Because if you're just doing it and never talking to them about it, they'll assume you're just doing your job. When you ask them and they answer it and they have to stop and think, then you quote unquote get credit for doing all those awesome extra and above and beyond things.
Gotcha. It kind of makes it seem like you're being strategic, like you're thinking at a higher level.
That's why I said it's a 200 IQ question.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so we got our boss's goals understood, and we're starting to kind of achieve those. What's next in the step-by-step process here?
I would say keep upgrading your skills. This is where people fall off. They stop. I had a boss way back in the day that had been doing his job so long. I said, so what's the next degree you're going to get? He looked at me and said, I've been doing this for 19 years. I am the best at what I do, and what I do isn't easy. And he basically Peter principled himself out of that job in 18 months because he did not value investing in himself, upgrading his skills, upgrading the value he was able to add to the organization. He plateaued himself by choice because he wasn't even willing to consider doing anything to grow himself. And I asked about getting a degree, but it was evident he wasn't interested in doing any kind of personal development. And that was basically his undoing. And I think it's a lot of people's undoings because your degree, your certification that you did 2 years ago or you did a year ago, guess what? The information you learned at the time might have still been dated because, it takes time from that information to be cutting edge to then they put together the certification program and then you take it, whatever that is. And what happens is by the time you get that information, it's already dated. It's already perhaps obsolete. And you've got to continue to work on growing yourself, upgrading your skills pretty much daily. So whatever that looks like, you've got to stay very much committed to investing in yourself.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I even tell my students when I'm teaching them, like computer science classes or digital information design, whatever I'm teaching at the moment, I'll tell them the things that you're learning today will be obsolete by the time you graduate. So make sure that you learn how you learn what you did today so you can continue to learn when you move forward. And so let me ask you a follow-up for that, upgrading your skills. Do I need to upgrade skills in my current position or upgrade skills for the next role? You know what I'm saying? So like if I'm, let's say I'm just I'm early on in my career, I'm a developer, but I know I want to get into management at some point. Do I need to work on the softer skills, as people say, or should I keep becoming a better programmer?
Well, soft skills are always going to help you, right? You're never going to be in an environment, let me not say never. So you're generally going to be working with other people. And if you work with other people, soft skills are always valuable. But that brings me to my point number 4, right? So yes. So the answer to your question is, yeah, you need to upgrade the skills you're doing now so that you can continue to do an excellent job where you are. But you also need to understand the skills you need for the next role. So I generally tell people, and this is where I tell people, it's in the book, talk about becoming a meeting Jedi, right? You've got to learn how to run meetings effectively, because the higher up you go, the less your impact is weighed about your technical skills and technical expertise and technical prowess, and the more it's weighed on how you're able to get things done through others. And meetings are a huge opportunity for most leaders to really energize their teams. And when I say meetings and energize, generally people do not put those two words in the same sentence, but that's because most meetings are terrible. And I offer there's a free course, free mini course I do on leading meetings that don't suck. And it's also on that page I mentioned earlier. But if you can learn how to run effective meetings and learn how to leverage meetings as a point of motivation, morale, engagement, then what you're going to be able to do is you're going to have that skill you're going to need in your next assignment. Or even if you're already in a management or supervisory or leadership role now, it's going to make you all that more effective and help you to get more out of your team, which is going to make you look better and help you to become that obvious choice for your next promotion. So yeah, you need to work on the current skills that you need, because if you stop doing a good job, then you're obviously not going to be promoted. If you're not doing an awesome job, that's going to be a mark against you. But you also want to look to the future and say, here's one quick way that I can impact my team, their productivity, their performance, everything. I can impact them in a very positive way. And for me, the low-hanging fruit is usually going to be running meetings that don't suck.
That's awesome. Yeah, because I have to say most of the meetings that I've been in my career have pretty much sucked. So we'll link that course up in the show notes as well, so people can access it there. But yeah, Absolutely. For sure. I think running a good meeting where people come away from it and they say, this was productive, this was not a waste of my time, is one great way to kind of step up to that next level and show not just your boss, but those around you that you are leading effectively.
Exactly. I mean, because this is where your leadership is most often seen by the group. So when you're in a team meeting and you're the one running the meeting, now everyone is in the same room looking at you. Often you're leading individuals, you're having conversations, you're working on accountability, things like that. But what you get when you're leading the meeting, people get to see in a group, can this person actually command the room? I had someone I was on a call with someone a few weeks back, and they said, man, I was in the meeting. It was my meeting, but it got hijacked. And, basically it just fell apart around me. And when we were talking, I said, wow, that it demonstrates a few things. But if you do that enough times, your leadership is so undermined. You're really just a figurehead at that point, because meetings are where you get to demonstrate that you know where you're going, you know what needs to get done, and that you have control of your team. And that's that you can actually provide the right kind of direction to get them moving, get them motivated, and have people become high performers under your leadership. So that's why, I mean, leading meetings that don't suck is so important, because it's pretty much an unspoken rule that most of the meetings are absolutely terrible. I used to go to a meeting, John, and I'm gonna tell this one real quick. There used to be a meeting at one of my companies. It was a 3-day meeting that they literally could have summed up in an email. 3 days. Are you kidding me? I mean, it to this day, my blood boils, and it's those types of experiences that have helped me to shape my approach to making meetings, and helping leaders to not make those mistakes. Because I think the stats on meetings are staggering. Like a third of the time, so if someone's getting paid $60,000 a year, they're literally spending a third of their time in meetings. So you're basically spending $20,000 on meetings. And if most of those meetings suck, then that means that's a complete waste of money for most organizations. So it's just, it just snowballs.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've talked about meetings before where I purged a lot of them that were pointless and worthless, and kept the ones that I had value with. And, I think if you lead a good meeting, then, you share that you are valuable to people's times. You show that you, like you said, command the room. You are leading the folks in that room, and they will see you as a leader outside of that, no matter what your title is.
Absolutely.
So, what's your next tip? I think we're on tip number 5 now. Is that right?
We're on tip number 5. Yeah. Tip number 5 is have a plan. Understand where you're going. And this is some of the difficult work for people, because most of us are going through day to day, paycheck to paycheck. We're just, as long as we're employed, as long as we show up and the doors on the building aren't chained up, right? We're good. We're just going through the motions. What I'm encouraging you to do is actually take the time to have a plan for your career. Where do you want to go? The people who end up as CEO don't get there accidentally. And most people, when they start out at a company, they want to be CEO. And then when that doesn't appear, they kind of just stop. But I'm going to ask you, figure out what your career goals are. Where do you want to be? What do you want to do? What title, what position are you looking to fill at some point? That's also going to, like we talked about before, that's also going to inform the types of skills you develop, the type of conferences you go to, the books you read, I said conferences, but I was going to say it again, the other elements that you bring into play to develop yourself into a leader that can fill that role and not Peter Principle yourself out. So you want to look at the gaps, right? Where are you now, and what does that role require of you? You want to look at what stretch assignments you can take on now. What do I need to do? Where am I hiding from opportunities and hiding from the moments that can make me stand out? I can tell you one of the big moments in my career was when I took on a stretch assignment that I didn't even know. I was too naive to know it was a stretch assignment. A VP came to me and asked, well, the HR person came, but then I worked with the VP pretty much entirely. But what happened was I didn't know at the time I was spinning up an entire consulting organization. I was doing the recruiting. It took me all over the world. I was recruiting in Malaysia, Singapore, all across the US, Europe, everywhere. But at the time, I didn't even see it as a stretch assignment. I was just open to the possibility that, hey, this seems cool, I'm going to go do it. But you've got to look for some of those stretch assignments. Sometimes it's you raise your hand and say, yeah, I'll do that. It may mean a little bit more work, but as long as you can balance work and life and make sure you don't, neglect the most important people for a stretch assignment, that can be very, very effective in helping you mitigate some of the gaps that you're going to have. But I would say definitely have a plan. And that's another thing. I give you a quick and dirty career plan, basically asking a few questions. I'd go over some of it in the book, and then there's a downloadable for that as well. But you need to have a plan. Nothing important happens without a plan, right? So you want to make sure that you start planning out your career. Even we talked about doing the, future, where my retirement, that's also the beginnings of a plan. Just put it on paper and watch what happens.
Awesome. So I got one more thing before I get there. How can people pick up the book, and where can they find out more about you and the courses that you offer?
Oh, Great. It's on Amazon. It's in paperback and it's on ebook. And if you look for Promotable or Dr. David M. Arrington, you can find it on Amazon. Or if you go to my website, arringtoncoaching.com, you'll be able. There'll be a right there on the home page, which we just redesigned. You'll see right there at the top. There's a link for the book right there. Makes it super easy. So the book is available. It's been doing pretty well. It's been a number one in I think about 10 categories. Really excited about that. It's number one new release in business ethics. I mean, one of my favorite ones. Here's real quick on Amazon, one of my favorite number ones we got was number one in business and money quick reads, 2-hour quick reads, because I wanted the book, seriously, I wanted the book to be a conversation. Mm-hmm. I didn't want the book to be this, busy, boring, just, I've read enough of those books and you get something out of them, but you kind of get through them. This book is like sitting down and having a conversation with me. I'm making references to music. I'm making references to movies and TV shows. I really wanted people to feel like, hey, this is David Arrington. You kind of sat with him. One of the best compliments I got on the book so far, well, two. One was Roan. Who did he put me up there with? Roan, Tracy, Covey, now Arrington. I love that one. And the other one was, thank you for not taking 400 pages to say what could be said in 80.
Nice.
So those are,
It's always harder to write something that's concise and makes sense than to write something that's too wordy. And, I love books like that. So that's fantastic. And yeah, I mean, being compared with Brian Tracy and Roan and Covey, I mean, those are like, the elite of the elite.
Exactly. And that's what he said. He was like, these are the classics. I was like, oh man. I was humbled. I don't have a problem coming up with words most often, but that one kind of stunned me. I was like, wow, okay, I didn't see that coming. But that's an awesome accolade from that gentleman.
Awesome. And we're also going to have that in on our page where we have books from our previous guests. You'll be able to get it there too at ageekleader.com. The last thing I want to ask you is in your bio, you mentioned something, and you just mentioned something about music. You talked about old school rap. So give me some old school rap titles that you like. Because I'm from back in the day, we used to go sing karaoke, and I would always do like, Baby Got Back, House of Pain, Jump Around, some Beastie Boys. What are your old school rap tunes that you're talking about?
So for me, it would be more KRS-One. It would be more Boogie Down Productions.
Oh, yeah.
It would be Beastie Boys, of course.
Yeah, any Rapper's Delight in there?
Of course. I mean, but then I forgot to even mention, I shaded more to, like, that was me in like elementary school. I shaded more to R&B hits, because I can sing a little bit. So, that was always very popular. But it did not hurt being able to sing when, as a young man in high school, on the ladies front. So,
Man.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I've been, so it is crazy. As I was doing this, I have like Boyz II Men songs stuck in my head. Water Runs Dry. Was it? Oh, now I can't remember the word. I've been singing it nonstop for at least 3 weeks. But yeah, a lot of Boyz II Men, ABC, BBD, the East Coast Family, of course. Just a lot of 90s, 80s, 90s songs. Who else did I like? Of course, Run DMC.
Oh yeah.
I mean, this is just the old school stuff. Queen Latifah, okay.
Yeah. Little crisscross.
Oh man, with their one song, right?
Yeah.
Jump. There were a lot of different influences. Of course, Michael Jackson.
Oh yeah.
Just a lot of different people, but yeah, it was a lot of Motown. It was a lot of R&B. It was, my dad loved country music, so that was just, so Willie Nelson was in there. So there's a rich tapestry of songs that I find in my background. But yeah, definitely, I'd have to say old school hip hop, old school. Kid and Play. You're asking, and I'm going way back. So yeah, I could go on, but I'm gonna stop.
All right, that sounds cool. All right, man. Well, I'm going to link everything up in the show notes at ageekleader.com. And I want to say thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it. I got a lot of good knowledge from here, and I'm sure our guest did too.
Oh, man, I appreciate it, John. It has been an absolute pleasure, and I really hope your audience enjoys it.
Hope you guys enjoyed that episode, and if so, please share it on social media. And also, this was recorded, well before the coronavirus hit the United States and before chaos has erupted across most of the world. So just bear in mind whenever you listen to this or even future episodes, I'm usually about 5 to 6 weeks out on recording. So a lot of these recordings are done prior to the events that are going on in the world today. But they're still valuable, still helpful, and I hope you guys check it out and check out the book. Definitely share this on Instant Messenger, or if you're on Slack with your folks or Zoom, whatever you're communicating with your team and with other folks that may get something out of this episode, please share it with them. Definitely check it out. Past episodes and future episodes, if you're at home and you have time to kill, I've got 148 of them in the archives that you can go back and listen to. They're all hopefully helpful and still valuable and still relevant. Again, thanks so much. I appreciate you guys, and I appreciate all that you're doing. We'll get through this together.